Good afternoon. Good afternoon, welcome back. Sorry about that. Today I want to pick back up where I left off in my last stream, and I really want to focus on finishing up this sky. Two early elements that I want to capture are the C shape, that's kind of in this portion of the reference image, and I want to add more weight to the center section here. That'll allow me to kind of fill this in, have a cloud shape kind of fill in this void that I have here that I haven't really worked on yet on the right hand side of the image, and then from there I want to begin to work down and begin to rethink about how the overall image can be balanced once we have our sky set in. So first goal was really to get the sky finished off, and the second goal was really to begin to fill in the bottom part of the image and begin to work on the actual mountains that'll be the hero of the image as a whole. So the first thing I want to do is start to work in this area here to kind of finish this area up, and what I want to do is have this lighter area pop out in front of this darker shaded area. And to do that, what I'm going to do is start here with a very white color. I'm going to also pick out, actually not seeing my hand so much, move that back, and then really just kind of draw a much larger brush here. I'm going to pick this Greeny Grooves Impasto brush. I've been jacking up the size quite a lot, and I'm just going to add a layer on top here as well, and I'm just going to work here and really just try to add a layer that differentiates these two images here, and that allows this to pop ahead of the gray or tone that's going to be beneath it. And I really want to force that back into the painting a little further. And again, I'm just kind of making these kind of soft circular motions as I do so to help this have more texture than the paint that's below it. And with the blender brush, again, very large, I'm just going to take this and gently soften it slightly while still being a little more violent with my strokes to really emphasize that added weight, to really emphasize the fact that this is in fact something that is closer to the eye than the piece below it. And I'm going to blend that in with the rest of the cloud shape below it so that it feels like one thing. Again, really just trying to adhere a little more paint here and adhere it in a way that's going to pop a little bit. One thing to notice is that I did apply this as a separate layer, so it'll kind of go over it and add a little depth anyway. And I'm going to add a little more, this time maybe a little bit darker of a color, well, hue rather. Just in spots. I'm going to add in this darker shade as well to again add some texture to this cloud that I want to pop out in front of the rest of the clouds. Again, very lightly now smoothing this out. Again, I want this to have texture to it and weight to it. I don't want it to feel quite as airy and fluffy as the layer below, but I still want to have the feeling of a cloud and the feeling of lightness. So again, just continuing to work on it, continuing to work over this, continuing to lighten and soften, and let that have that more weight to it. The next piece that I kind of want to do here is I want to really also kind of take a look at and kind of assess if that's exactly what I want. I think what I want too is to add some reflectivity to this. So this is a part of the painting that's going to have a where there's a lot of sunlight reflecting off it. So I think what I want to do is add some paint also below this with the groovy brush. And I'm just going to go through and add some of these shapes on the edges of where that white color was, and the same here. Now I'm going to blend that color out. Again, really here I'm just trying to add a little bit of extra pop and a little bit of extra reflectivity to the image as a whole without having it be overbearing or overly bright. I just want the eye to pause here very subtly. And as I blend that through, kind of remove and add the paint, swirl it around, it's going to diminish that yellow shade a little bit while still letting it pop out and still letting it work with the layer both above and below it to have a little more pop. Now back to the layer I was working on. Again, I'm just going to try to go through here and just take off some but not all the excess paint. I just want to have that extra little bit of weight to it without really having any kind of like feeling of mass. I don't want it to feel like it has actual mass. So like the next thing I'm going to do is add another sky layer, and I'm going to begin to work on this cloud that's a little more in front. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a darker shade like this, and I'm going to take my green and groovy brush again with a larger brush size, and I'm just going to work in here. Maybe not that. Maybe I want something that actually flows a little more like this. Larger brush size. Yeah. It'll flow a little more, and that's a little bit more of what I want earlier on here. Again, I want to try to keep a more circular motion here so that our clouds have more of a cloud shape to them. And I'm not even going to try to really fill everything in. I just want to have a base gray layer that I'm going to extend out. It can really blend into this area quite a bit. So again, really just trying to apply a base layer here, and then use the blending techniques that I've shown so far to really let this behave. So again, I'm just going to kind of spread this out. The initial layer will likely be kind of light and airy and fluffy, which is fine. Because we've stacked it on top of the other layers, it's naturally going to pop out from it. And because it's a darker shade as well, it'll also help it further pop out and further stand out from the layers that are behind it that are much lighter in color or chroma. And I really want to have this feel and use the weight of the added paint above it to allow that to feel a little bit more forward in the image and a little more present. And I'll add in other shades of white as I add depth on top of this and add layers on top of this base. Again, just trying to maintain that cloud shape, maintain the circular motions that I'm using, and really not shake my table with how violently I'm applying this paint. And really just try to let this fill the area that it needs to fill. Circular motions, pulling down to have that cloud shape, trying to leave little subtle areas where things don't quite match exactly, letting that undercolor shine through a little bit so that orange is still present, because that'll help balance things out as we add on more layers, and it'll give us little areas to either fill in or little areas where we can apply a complementing color to help make it a little more impactful. This region is also going to balance out very nicely the blue shade that we have over here. Because this is our base layer, I do want to try to remove some of the excess paint in quotation marks that we're seeing here. And I do want to keep it nice and light and fluffy and airy, and let this be something that is very airy and light, because again, this is only the first of a few different layers that we're going to apply here, and only the first of a few different things, the paint layers that are really going to be out, that are going to be stuck in this area, stuck in this region. Now, I really kind of want to gently blend this in with the whiter layer below it so that it feels like it's one form. Trying to gently and lightly brush it in so that it feels a little more connected. And it feels like that color is a little more unified into one general shape. Cool. Now that I have that first layer set up, I am going to apply an even darker shade back to my flow brush, and I'm just going to apply this in this top region here. So I want the top of the painting to feel like it has a little more weight. Sorry for 1 second. A little bit of hair on the screen there. And I'm just going to, again, lightly fill this in. Not the entire thing, I want to be kind of sparing with this, but again, adding a little weight and just kind of going through and letting that breathe a little back to my blend. And we're just going to go through and do a circular motion. Soften and soften. And the idea here is to add a little more depth to these clouds and to add just a little more shape. And I'm not really caring about how they look overall. I'm being very focused on how they just work together to form what the mind thinks a cloud is. So the next thing I want to do is go a little bit lighter in shade, and I want to go back to my flow brush, and I'm going to do a little bit of the opposite right in this region here, I think. I don't want to have smooth boundaries here. It's okay if I go over a little bit. I want these to kind of feel like they're kind of part of the same thing. So again, back to that, we're just smooth this out, lighten it, let these tones come together. And really let this breathe, and let these let these different shades of gray and white interact. Okay. Now I think I want to go back to the darker tone. And I'm also going to place a line of darker color, I think in this area here. Again, the goal is to make this feel like something that is active, and to make this feel like something that is, you know, this is a storm you don't want to get caught in. This is something that I want to make sure that the viewer feels is alive and as if it's actual weather, right? As if it's, you know, the kind of thing you're seeing on the news. Not really seeing on the news, but maybe like, you know, it'll be in the weather forecast kind of thing. And just kind of working through, letting the tones interact a little more, letting this spread out into this little orangey region a little bit, and kind of letting these decisions that I'm making here decide how these tones interact and decide how they blend together to make that image of a cloud in your mind. Cool. Now back to an even lighter shade, and I'm going to add this in kind of along this frontal boundary here, I think. And maybe a little bit along this lower corner as well. And that'll help this have a little more pop and synergy to it. And in that area too, I think. Like that. Back to blending. Lifting up here to have this help establish that kind of boundary. Going through. I'm trying to be very loose and free with my strokes here. I'm trying to be very loose in the way that I am letting these interact so that we have this general shape and appeal of these clouds without letting them have too much form. Because again, a cloud's not really going to have a form that is easily discernible, so you want to make sure that you are putting in shapes that match that aesthetic. Now, I want to add a layer on top of this, and what I'm going to do is... I was not sure if I fit in the layer or not. So, back to the darker color, back to the flow brush, and I'm going to put it in the shape right here. And I'm just going to try to add some more color and tone to this. And again, I'm just trying to add depth to this part of the image, and I'm trying to add it by adding in these more different tones to it. But again, let different parts of the image pop out from the rest, and to give it that three-dimensional appeal. And now I'll blend this away, blend this back in. And go through and just continue to blend this part of the cloud back in to make it feel more prominent. Basically, on the left hand side of the image, I really want the blue to pop, and on the right hand side here, I really want these grays to pop. I want the left hand side to almost feel lighter than the right hand side. I want to give the impression the clouds are moving from right to left, which is why they are in front. Cool. So I'm now going to have one more layer here, and we're going to add some highlights onto this. So highlights are really just areas where I think the image itself needs to be a little brighter. So I'm going to focus on this top corner here, and I'm just going to kind of work in with lighter colors, lighter tones, and make sure that I'm matching the bright parts of the image together to kind of bring this back into harmony with the rest. And one thing I'll do as well as I do this layer is I'll probably adjust its opacity to make it feel a little bit different. And I'm going to kind of also bring this down to this section of the image. Cool. Then I'm just going to work this over. And let these kind of flow together. And to really add that beautiful depth to the painting, and to really add that feeling of a sky that is far above, clouds that are light but moving with intention, and that are moving with rain. And just pulling these down, circular motions. Quickly also, I'm trying to be quick with my brush strokes here, because I know that if I take my time and I plan on every stroke methodically, I'll get a result that is much more geometric than what I want. So I'm trying to intentionally, not to think, and I'm trying intentionally to let my hand do some of the guesswork here, and let my hand really think for itself, and let my hand do the work rather than my brain. Your brain will trick you. And I'm really just trying to leave an impression of a cloud. I want the viewer as a whole to soak that in. I think I'm also going to add in some of this color a little below here. This region here. Again, just trying to blend this in. We want it to appear like it is harmonious, but we want it to appear a little bit in front of the rest of the clouds in this cloud formation. And I really want this to be a little more distinct from the rest of the painting, a little more distinct from the clouds on the other side, as if they are much more in shadow versus the rest of the image. And I'm really just trying to soften these. I'll probably brighten them a little more and add a darker tone of yellow at certain points because they are reflecting light. So we are seeing light reflected in this area probably. Potentially down in here as well. So let me do that next. I'm going to add on that same layer of yellow. So now on a different layer, I'm just going to go through and apply some paint here along this boundary. Do not worry about how much this shouts right now, because we're going to apply a layer on top of this. Go along there. And I think also along here as well. And I'm going to keep adding on more layers of white onto this to make it have a little more luminosity and brightness to it. A lot of oil paintings will also get a yellow tone as they age. So by adding in this yellow, it's also giving an appearance of an older painting. That's just as the oil naturally changes. This is also going to tell me where to apply that big, heavier brushstroke layer, so I know exactly where that needs to be in the image. Now, another layer on top. Pure white, titanium white, correct brush, and I'm just trying to follow along the yellow with very violent and obvious stripes. Cool. Now the same thing, we're just going to soften it up just a little bit, not a ton, making sure that I'm removing white paint to reveal the yellow below. And to simulate that action of the light reflecting back to the viewer. And as I'm going through, this is starting to have a lot more harmony with the other half of the painting. It's making the change to the darker tones of the more active clouds be a little more slow and dramatic, or a little more slow rather than being so dramatic. It's letting the viewer soak in some more of the light that's shining off the clouds on this side of the painting as well. You're trying to retain a lot of the yellow underneath and really let this kind of live. Working the boundary a little more. And breathe. That's not this layer. Let's do that again. That's down here. Shape in so that it meets up with that section there. Move down a little bit to have that idea of rainfall. And I'm going to pull back across. Nice and gently like that. To establish that boundary of where this rainfall meets the actual cloud cover. Lightly going back and forth a little bit. I really just do want to have this be pulled down slightly. Okay. I'm almost satisfied with my clouds. My next step will be to add on and really begin to look about and think about the overall composition of the image. So let's go back and add on. So first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to save. I'm going to create a save point. And I'm just going to call this Sky Dome. You probably can't see what I'm doing right now, but that's fine. And it's saving away. Cool. Now we have a new version of our painting, and what I'm going to begin to do here is merge layers together, so the sky becomes one layer. So merge layer below, merge layer below, merge layer below. All these layers that I created while I was creating the sky, I will then go ahead and make into one. In general, it's best not to do that. It is better to. I'm going to undo that. I think I clicked the wrong button. Yep, I did. And I want to do a couple things first. Number one, I want to go back and I want to see how this message meshes with our original noton and our original scheme of lights. Now I'm going to change this to just sky and clouds with no J in the word clouds. And let's turn on some layers here and see how we did. So overall, the noton itself, I think we're pretty good. We're looking pretty good there. If I turn on the light facing side, I think we're also pretty good. We did a good job of matching those together, and I think we did a good job of adding in depth and feel where it needed it. And I think we did a good job of adding in nice blues. So I'm going to unlock our noton layer, and I'm going to take my flat blending brush. I'm going to click on the noton layer, and I'm going to just try to jack up my brush size quite a lot. I'm just going to blend out some of this a little bit. I'm going to lock my sky layer. I'm just going to blend this out to again add to let this underpinning that we created shine through a little bit. And this is adding in, I think, a lot of nice little depth to what we created here. And I really like the way that the blue becomes very rich when it's near the clouds like this. I really do. And notice how that immediately changed the dynamic effect of what we created. And this is something that's going to occur as we turn these layers back on and off as we get deeper into the painting. So now that we've kind of judged and reassessed where we are with our Noton, what I want to do next is add on a new version of the sketch layer. And I'm going to turn everything off except for the sketch layer, and I'm going to then add on a layer above sketch. And what I'm going to call this is just grid. And what I want to do with this layer is just make sure that my composition matches the overall look and feel of the painting itself. So I'm picking black as can be, and I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to divide this into rough thirds. So we have I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to go straight up and straight up, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to go across, and I'm going to say across here, and I'm going to say across here. So now, read that one. So now on this layer, we are basically looking at our thirds, right? And each box here represents a different part of the composition. I'm going to put this grid layer on top, turn the sky back on, and see how we did. And we did a good job of having activity right along these lines. So for this corner, we have a little interest there. On this corner, we have the intersection here. And on these two corners now is where we're going to form some of the interest for our main foreground. So turning back I want to move the sketch layer up higher as well. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. We're going to unlock it first, then we're going to do that. And now we're going to lock both these again. So now, what I want to do next, and the other good thing that we've done so far, is we have Mount Washington very centered here. It is very centered in the image. Naturally, that's likely because of the fact that we used the view. When I was taking the picture itself, I used the viewfinder, so that's why it has that very precise center image, because cameras, that is the wonderful magic of cameras. So now, what I want to do is think about what colors Mount Washington actually is. And similarly, I might also bump this sketch over a little bit so that Mount Monroe is closer to this line. So if I take the sketch layer and unlock it, I'm going to lock, that's all fine, and I'm going to take this tool, I'm just going to drag this over so that the mountains are a little bit different in the image. So now, compositionally, we have shifted this image over. And now we're looking at this in a way that we have Mount Washington a little bit off center, and we have Mount Monroe on that axis, and that is a point where compositionally this will help lead the eye into the gap between the two, right? So now that is my goal. So I'm going to lock that back up, go back to my brush tool before I forget, and I'm going to pick the paint layer, and what I'm going to do is pick a Van Dyke brown that's very light in tone, take a flow brush, and I'm just going to apply paint on the canvas. And I'm going to take a relatively small brush, and I'm just going to begin to follow this line as I go through, and I want to try to keep these edges a little bit on the smooth side. And I'm just going to try to follow this ridge to the best of my ability. And at this point, I do also want to pay attention to the overall shape of the terrain. And I want to capture that this part of the terrain is really falling away. And we're falling away in this direction too. Right? This is our ridge here. So this line that's in the foreground is meant to draw the eye into this area here. So this curve is going to be fine, but it's also going to need to have something redirect the eye away from this area and back into here. So that's going to be what we do with the shapes of other mountains, of other visual interests as the eye travels along this journey. And we'll use some of the other colors as we add them in to create that feeling, that sense. Now I'm just adding in directionality here, adding a little more paint so we get the feel for how the mountain should be shaped. And now we're just adding in, and I'm going to blend this out as we go through. I will also likely need to shift our noton layer eventually in a very similar manner until it lines up and gets the correct shadows. Or we'll add on a second noton layer at the end for where the shadows should be in our world. Remember, in your world, you can do anything you want, and the world you create can be anything that you want to create. Cool. Now, I also want to make sure that I maintain a gap between this color and this line here. So I want to make sure that I can push this area further forefront. It's okay that I have this here because that kind of melts into this part of the ridge, but I want to make sure that I maintain that this area here is in front. So I'm going to take my blender brush, smaller, and just begin to pull down while maintaining that ridge line. I'm not worried that there's blue and different sky shapes coming through here. I'm fine with that. What I want to make sure of is that I'm just capturing the contours of the mountainside. Similar to the sky, I'm going to add on a lot of layers of paint to this. Conceptually, if this was a real painting, each time I add a new layer, all I'm really doing is allowing the paint to dry. So that is essentially the feel that I want. I want to also use layers to establish the feel that, hey, this guy took a long time painting this out. As I add on these layers, I'm also going to be thinking about the different colors that are present in the mountainside, and the different colors that are present there. One thing I'm noticing here, now we have a gap because I moved it. So I will likely have to go back to our sky layer and fill that in somehow, and I will likely put a hint of blue there. And I will blend that little blue back into the sky as a whole. But we can do that later on. And again, no mistakes, only happy accidents. This is, for now, all we're really doing is blocking in shapes, and we're blocking in the overall base layer for our mountains. And this layer is going to be the thing that drives a lot of our choices later on, and really drives where we're going to pick and choose where our certain shapes will be. I want to let this fall away because I want this to have the appearance that we have a ridge here. So I'm kind of going, my strokes here are very downward, my strokes here are very horizontal. we're kind of beginning to establish the fact that we have this ridge line that's really falling away here. Similarly over here, I'm basically adjusting my strokes and letting them switch from very near vertical to very near horizontal. Back to the big guy. It's okay to slide under that under the line that we were talking about before. I just want to make sure by the time I do that I'm blending out and it's much lighter, because that's going to help me establish depth later on. I almost want your eye to think that you can step on your toes a little bit and see over that ridge. If you're wondering, yes, I actually did there sit up on my toes a little bit. Pulling down, blending, letting this area be lighter as I approach that ridge line. Okay, now I'm going to name this layer because it's going to be around for a long time. I'll call it mountain base, as if a cobra or something. And I'm going to add on a layer here, and I'm going to start painting our launching area. So, number one, I'm going to take a very different brush than we've seen before. I'm probably going to take this detail brush, and I'm going to take a blue, and I'm going to paint on those towers very carefully. Very small brush. I'm just going to take these and paint on these forms and figures that are going to be those three towers that are in the distance. That guy's too big, we're not gonna do that one. And this I want to represent the weather station. This is going to add depth and feel. Let the viewer know exactly how far away these are. I'm gonna add on some more layers of depth here. Some dark paint here to give you some shape. Every dark cone needs a highlight. These are going to reflect some light, so we'll also put on some yellow here. And now what I'm going to do is jack my brush size down way smaller. I don't want a lot of detail here. I want this to be a little blurry, because again, these are far away. These are structures that are likely over a mile away from us as the viewer, so it's okay for them to be a little bit wonky and a little bit blurry and not quite clear to the eyes to what they are, what we're looking at. What I'm doing here is just kind of shortening this up a little bit. removing some of the excess paint and letting it really do its thing. Same thing here. Okay, cool. And same thing here, where I just want this to be a little bit more blurred. Our detail brush, and just gonna add in some gray. Now, we're going to rename that one. This is now our weather station. Back on top. Now we're going to add on some dull red. So now, think of that first. We'll add on some more of this blue. And we're going to go to our grainy grooves brush. We're going to keep this fairly small. This is a distant part of the painting. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to scratch at the painting a little bit to give depth here. I'm going to try to have my strokes match the direction of my previous strokes. And the goal here is not to create one-to-one. The goal here is to add layers over time and create the feel that we're looking for. Okay, now blending. And I'm okay with this staying kind of small. I want this to be blurry. I want indications. I don't want actual... I'm also going to turn off the sketch layer and the grid layer. So one thing that I'm noticing with that sketch layer off is that I'm seeing that I don't really have a very clearly defined ridge line there. And I'm probably going to want to work that back in, so I do. Now I think to do that, what I'm going to have to do is take a darker shade, let's say this gray here, and take my detail brush and just run this along. Like so, to create that more clearly defined ridge. And I'm going to take my blender brush, just work that together to let that feel just a little bit more defined. And just working this over, letting this feel like it has a clear definition. And now what I'm going to do next is take on some shades of lighter gray back to our grainy grooves here. I'm just going to begin to work in some of these colors now. And let them add even more shape and definition to our mountainside here. And again, I'm trying to be a little bit mindful of where the contours are going to be. Be a little mindful of the little gaps and crannies that I've created as I've added on detail and layers here. Back my blender brush, again, very small, maybe a little bigger. Or between those two. Now, something I've been hankering to do for a little while here, I'm going to do this on a new layer, because it's very bold, is I want to capture some of that red. And there is, I want to use some of that red to fill in some of these areas here. And try to use the red to create that little crevice you're seeing just below the sun. It's kind of leading in this direction here. And what's creating the red color in the actual image are alpine bushes. I forget the exact kind of gorse bush they are, but they're basically a gorse bush that has a very deep, like reddish tone to them. Add on some darker tones to kind of balance out some of the brighter tones. I also want to use this to kind of demonstrate areas of the mountain that aren't quite as steep, where there are some guys living, hanging out. Whereas areas like this are almost too steep to have that kind of bush in it. And this color is going to get more prominent as we get closer in. You can see it more in Mount Franklin than you can that kind of orangey shade there. In fact, it's a little bit orange, so I will add on some of that as well. And as I blend this, I'm going to have to be very careful that I'm making sure that I'm following the contour. So I'm basically going to use my blender brush to readjust these strokes, to readjust the wet paint, and to make sure that we are being mindful of where the mountain's going as I'm adding this paint on. Cool. So now here, and just be very mindful of what I'm doing and where I'm doing it, and the direction of the strokes that I'm making. As I go through and add on this layer, I'm likely going to have to add a lot of paint on top of this to really soften it out. But it's kind of having the effect that I want. Another trick that I can do in a moment here is play with the opacity of the layer to give it that more transparent feel of a color sitting on top of it, let more of the gray shine through. Again, really trying to let these colors work together rather than against each other. Just being mindful of my directionality again, softening this image to spread it up even further. Taking off some of the paint that I applied, make it seem a little bit more natural. And I'm really trying to let this work together with the blue under it, and really trying to let it meld together as one to really create the different sides of the mountain, so that the mountain looks more three-dimensional and has more texture and shape to it. So that's why I've kind of intentionally had this be more blue and this be more gray. Almost as if this side is much more this side here is much more in the sun than this side. Now back to keep working this. Keep working it. Being mindful of the direction of the brushes. Being mindful of the overall tone of the area that I'm working in, so that it doesn't appear overly red, that you will have any huge blue view. I'm also going to continue to add layers here, so it's okay that I change things. So I'm going to go back, take this gray again, take our 3D brush, and right back in. So I'm going to take this here and try to shape this little ravine as I see it. Over here, I'm going to try to shape where the different mountain sides change, and let this then fall away a little bit. Trying to give a little more depth and feel to Mount Washington as a whole. Feel there is also the most important word, because in this style of painting it is more about feel than it is exacting, and I want to give the eye subtle impressions. I don't want to overload it. I want you as the viewer to really see and interpret that, and really let you decide what's going on, and really let you see and feel the impact of it. back to our bluer gray, maybe a little darker this time. And as the mountain is receding, it's also getting closer. So I kind of want to have a darker shade here of this blue as well. Mix it in. Let it leave. Let it breathe. The overall tone that I'm trying to capture here is that this is not a homologous thing. It is a collection of rocks. It is a pile. It is not smooth. It is jagged. It is rough. It is difficult. It is imposing. And it absolutely has a sheen to it where you can tell from a distance that it is a very rugged terrain. It's not. It isn't like Everest where you're looking at where you think of it as a giant, piece of rock sticking out of the ground. It's much more of a ground down, glaciated shell of its former high peak. And I'm really trying to let different colors I'm using here, and the fact that I'm using so much color, and the fact that I'm letting it kind of intersperse like this, add more character and detail to the mountain than you would see like a Bob Ross painting or like in a more romantic image of it. And I'm trying to just capture the impression of the mountainside. As I blend through it. And over there, I'm going to come back and add on shapes like that. Texture there as well. So now this area has become a little bit dull. So what I want to do is come back, take our gauze such as this maybe, and I want to now add in some shapes like this. I'm going to take a brighter shade of that on this side and add that in maybe here as well. Hard to see this because the color is so similar, but it is there, and I'm just going to now scratch at it. And here again, back to our more bluish color, and I'm just going to scratch it. And then blend. Basically what I'm doing is just applying and blending paint in a very scratchy kind of manner with very small brush strokes. And now back to our gray, maybe a little brighter gray. Just letting this have some texture to it, maybe over here as well. Scratching it a little bit, kind of letting all these different shades interact. And really letting all of this work together. If this were a winter scene, it would probably look completely different. It would probably be much more white and much more solid in its appearance, but the fact that we're here in the summer, means that we're going to have this much more craggy appeal to it, and I'm going to go with a darker shade, something like that, and kind of fill this area in with that. Again, being mindful that every highlight needs a shadow, so we're kind of going to work around that in a way that fills that in some. I'm really working on detail here, so I really want this to be a fundamental part of the painting, an area where the eye gets kind of trapped looking at different brush strokes and using the brush strokes to formulate the eye the painting on what it actually is. Now, detail brush. And I'm just going to spread this from there. And I'm going to go back to this color again and overpaint that. I think that was a bit brighter than I wanted it to be. I kind of just want to follow this little shape that I created here. And now I'm just going to have a seesaw motion back and forth. As I fill that in. And kind of give the impression that, hey, maybe there's actually a trail taking this ravine up the peak. I don't think there really is, but I kind of want that to have that appeal to it. And back to my darker part, I use the shade instead. And back to our detail brush. Working in that middle area there, and then blending in a kind of manner, letting all these different colors and shades interact. And really trying to create visual interest in this little area. And I'm going to take some darker shades, and I'm going to try to touches. What I'm trying to do with this black pad that I applied is really let this feel like it has. Like, I want it to feel different than this color. And I want it to feel like it has depth to it. And I want the oranges and reds here to appear kind of dull, because they are very far away. And not a lot of light from them would reach our eyes. But the stones are going to be reflecting a lot of that midday sun back at us. So that's why I want them to have that kind of brighter appeal, where the redder tones of these bushes that are giving that red tone back are not going to be reflecting nearly as much light back as these brighter stones. Now, I want this to continue to this. Now, I've kind of created two different valleys here, so what I'm going to do is, very similarly, I'm going to have this one be a little more orange though, is paint this in here, like so. And now I'm going to try to pull this color into this other valley that I've created. Again, this is, not one-to-one, this is my version of what I want it to be, so I'm very much okay with deviating from the actual landscape as it is. And I'm okay with just creating this in a way that kind of gives the overall look or impression going on. At some point too, we may redo the weather station, because it kind of feels like it has like a smokestack. That's a bit. Cool. Now, I kind of want to have a similar effort on this side, and I want to take our detail brush, but now we're going to use darker shades of blue to kind of fill in this area and give this impression of the darker side. And Matt Washington's way to hero this painting, so I do want to make sure I'm taking my time with it, and I want to make sure that I am creating some nice detail. And I want to make sure that I'm really being kind of very deliberate in the texture that I'm creating from the outside. And I will likely have to add on some bright tones here, just because I can kind of feel this becoming a bit duller than I want it to be. That's okay. Again, there's nothing that can be. Each time I make a mistake, what I'm essentially doing, or not really, mistake's a bad word. Each time that I create something that I'm not exactly fond of, all it's encouraging me to do is add on another layer. And each time I do that, I'm going to add on what appears to be more detail. So I'm okay with letting this get away a little bit away from me and letting this kind of breathe a little bit, and then taking other colors and adding on more detail as we go through to really create the total package of the mountainside. So each time I do this, I'm creating little different spots of texture. Brush size about half, and really let the smaller brush size add different texture to this side. And by doing that, you can open the eyes almost kind of seeing individual stones or individual shapes or individual like outcroppings, even though I really can't see if it's too far away. And we're gonna come over here, kind of like this. Working in, filling in the orange areas. Letting the mountain be a mountain. Now, I also want to have some more of these red tones and orange tones, so I'm going to apply some of the red first. For the red, I'm going to use Van Dyke Brown in this darker shade of it. A much smaller grainy Grooves brush. I'm just going to fill in some areas where I think that there could be some stuff in. And I want this to be much duller on this side, because the little light that we're going to get back from these bushes and plants that are on this side, that are on this face of the mountain, are getting less sunlight, and less sunlight means they're reflecting back even less than what we saw on the other side. Here I'm going to try to create another one of those little looks like granny valleys that we have over here. And so I think what I'm going to do is take a very dark gray and work my way from here up. And from here a little bit down. Try to not get too close to Mountain Road. And a little bit in the middle as well. And then we're going to take a darker shade, like this guy, and work that across the top here. And a little bit here as well. Really just let these different shapes and colors play a little bit. And the only thing I'm really trying to be mindful of is making sure the direction of my strokes matches the direction of the contours, and that will create areas of different shape and feel, and areas that have the appearance of being little variations in the slope, and even in this case, like major variations in the slope, where this is now going to appear like a ravine head. I'm just working this down, really letting it breathe a little, and letting the colors interplay. You have to make bold decisions. Bold decisions are good. Notice how I'm choosing a color that's very brown here. Because of the colors that are around, it's very, very deep red. And that's definitely a very interesting thing about color, because it will take the color we perceive is heavily influenced by the colors that are around it. So, you know, a brown next to a blue will appear very different than a brown next to a red. Be mindful of the tone as I'm blending here, as I'm working through in this area to create this visual interest, this visual texture. The other thing that these kind of little crevices are doing is they're creating visual interest that draws the eye up toward the top, right? And that's where I want the eye to feast. I want you to get here and really think about it. In fact, I am for this. I want you to do this. What I am going to do instead is something a little more bold. I'm going to take some white and we're going to pretend that we have some snow. And I'm just going to take some white here and apply it along the top. Follow along some of these contours, like so. Then I'm going to blend this white color out. Essentially what I'm doing now is I'm capping the mountain. Whether it be a snow cap or just an area that is reflecting a little more light, I don't know for sure yet, but I do know that I am very keen to capture some more visual interest here. And using this more whitish color will help me achieve that. Again, I'm trying to also think about where the light's coming from and what's happening here. So I'm going to take a little darker shade now, and I'm going to apply something similar here. And I'm really just gonna let this go to town a little bit. Bigger brush. Smaller brush. Back to a darker shade. Back to the greeny grooves. Rebuild some of that visual interest that we kind of got rid of here. Build it back in. Speak for itself. Pull these back up. And into this area. Fill it in a bit. Have a greater tone. You stroke defining the contour. Working those contours so that we feel the mountain gradually falling away. Lines on this side, drawing us back in. So we're going to want to have a little bit more color here, I think. So let's add some orange onto this side, moving in this direction. And we want to draw the eye to the peak. Finally, as we get in the bottom corner here, we're gonna add our first green. And really just letting this form the shape and let this define where these trees fall away. This mountain range does have an alpine zone. There are spots where there are no trees due to the high winds. And we want to make sure that we're kind of gradually indicating that, hey, there are areas where the trees come back there. And as we move further down the slope, we get the spots where there are these hints of green slowly working their way up the slope. Again, still trying to follow the contours and just trying to lightly fill in the bottom section. Increase my brush size a little bit. Just pull this down to let it fill more of the canvas more rapidly and to let it breathe a bit. trying to be careful to not get too close to this wheel. Now, I'm also kind of noticing that this area here kind of falls away, but it's not going to pick my sketch line, and I haven't quite gotten close enough to a ridge. So I do want to add in some more here. So what I'm going to do is turn the sketch layer back off, and I'm going to take a little bit darker shade of green now, and I'm going to add in some more here. Again, it's going to add a little bit more depth and complexity, and add a little more depth in terms of where these trees are actually living. Let them creep a little bit higher in here as they pull down. Again, I'm following the contours. I'm letting this follow the direction of the mountain itself. Let these come a little higher in here as well. Whoops! I don't usually use the undo button unless I make a really big mistake like that. And that's really the kind of thing where I just pick the wrong button rather than actually add an accurate brush stroke. Now back to our smaller brush size. Just going to gently let this fill in. Again, trying to be mindful of the contours again. And let some of these greens mix and let them blend in with the rock that we've already created. And let the texture of this green color also now add more richness to the texture of the mountainside itself, so that we can also see that this is also now adding in even more complexity, even more striation to the pigment, the overall feel and overall gravity and weight of the mountain itself. Letting the blender brush do a lot of the work here, and I'm going to also, like we did with the other layers, we're going to add on more and more paint as we add on to this section to give it that depth and feel of something that's actually there. If they use those variations in color to catch light, you imagine how we envision different light reflecting differently. Here I'm trying to imagine that this little shape here is continuing down. So I'm trying to mirror that as I get further down the slope and let these different colors interact. I'm really just letting my hands and eyes do a lot of the work here. The beauty of the color around here as well is it's allowing a lot of this color to mix in a way that still has a lot of that orange undertone, which is adding in, which is complementing the greens really, really well. I'm going to go back to the larger brush and have this be a little more violent for a time being, just to kind of fill in a base color a little bit. To really kind of let that base color spread out a bit. And then I'm going to go through and blend more readily with the smaller brush to create the more textured feel that I'm looking for. I really just want to, for the time being, I just want to follow the overall ridge line here. I'm also creating a base layer that the rest of our mountains will be able to stick to. And this is basically where Mount Franklin will be, so I'm not going to be overly concerned about this shade here. I just want to make sure that I am creating something we can grab onto. So now we're going to go back to our smaller brush size and really work this. And then I can also come back and add on some more different shades of green here. I think I was using this guy. This guy? Yeah, that guy. By adding on this lighter tone, I'm just trying to be mindful of where our trees might be catching light, and that's going to be really occurring, I think, along some of these lines that are here. I think in this area, it would actually be the opposite, where we're going to have darker lines here, kind of between them. We're going to have that. And over here, I think we have more lighter shades as well, because now we're into an area that will catch more sunlight, even though we are kind of under Little Mountain Franklin, Little Mountain Monroe. That's okay, because we don't really know exactly where it's going to live yet, so it's okay that we have these lighter and darker shades here. I kind of want to follow this line here a little bit, like that. Maybe it's there even. Now I'm going to again come back, and I'm just going to work these through. And let all this mix and combine and create a lot of variation and striation. That's really very mindful of the overall layout of the landscape without there being a lot of large and obvious brush strokes. Kind of want the brush strokes to be very small and very rapid and very quick. I can very similar to clouds where I don't want detail. I want my hand to not really think about it. I just want to kind of go. And I want to let this mix and blend. Adding in, taking away, adding back. But each time I do that, I'm adding a little bit depth and feel and different texture, and I'm kind of changing where the texture is. I'm kind of letting the orange underneath get a little more involved, and it's creating these kind of really nice little patterns and little different lines where we can imagine the ridge is not uniform. Similar to the rocks I made above, is kind of creating these natural little nooks and crannies, letting us open, and we're kind of letting those dictate where the trees are, where they live, what's going on, and letting all these colors work together to have this much more lively feel for the mountainside. Again, this part's probably getting painted over, so I don't care as much. But I do want to make sure that my base color is a little more even, because that will prevent. It'll help me as I'm shining things through. I'm really kind of focused solely on this side of the image for now. So I really want this to be the The main thing I'm going to add on some details on this side of the ridge as well, as we fill in from left to right. In this bottom corner, I suspect some of this might survive to the end, so I do want to make sure that I am letting the texture do its work a little bit. Because you can see, if I turn the sketch layer back on, you'll see that this is going to die right away. No, it'll be below the line. So, right about till here. Oh, this is very under where that ridge is going to be. Okay, cool. So I'm going to take a big brush, a big blender brush. Sketch layer is locked, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to do this very rapidly because I don't really care about this anymore. I recognize that a lot of the work that I was doing is going to be under the rest of the painting, so I'm just going to kind of fill things in a little bit and create a layer that can be added onto later on, but I don't really care about the detail of it. I just want something to grab onto. I'm basically using this to create underpainting. And then once I kind of do this, we're going to work on the right-hand side of the ridge a little bit, and maybe Mount Monroe, which will sit in front. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is Monroe and Little Monroe. No, the next thing I'm going to do is going to be over here. And what I'm going to do is new layer. And I'm going to take this gray and I'm going to take the grooviness again and a little larger brush size. I'm going to work in some of these areas here and try to fill in areas that are too big. Way too big. Even this is probably too big. Again, just want to try to fill in a base at first to establish where our contours are and where they're going. And on this side, I want to be very mindful because this side of the ridge will maintain into the foreground. Because we can see this all the way up into here. Cool. Now, some lighter shades here. This ridge would be getting sunlight, so I kind of want to do this similar. Follow along with a lighter color along the top here. Turn off the sketch layer because now it's getting a bit in the way, and I want to be mindful and add in some colors. Now we are going to have some more green higher up on this side than on the other side. Basically, this side on the right here is windward. So this side gets a lot more wind. The trees will not be as tall on this side. This side is protected by the ridge. Therefore, the trees will come higher up this elevation line. So here, pretty much from this entire area, we're going to have a green shade covering a lot of this. Before I get to that, I want to add on some of our red and orange tones here. And I'm going to go back into here, go back into our very tiny brush size, and just work in these orange and red tones a little more before I begin to let this ridge drop off with that greener color. Here's what I'm trying to do is be very flat near the top and then let my strokes fall almost vertical down into these other areas here. And to be very mindful of our contours, be very mindful of the overall color and shape of the ridge that I want. Almost flat in some sections and then quickly falling down. Like really shoom, like sound effects fall. And like almost near vertical strokes at some points. This spot of the ridge is also a little bit further in the background, so it's okay that we don't have some of the more speckled appeal of Mount Washington. I'm going to probably add that back in a moment and on a different layer. But for now, I kind of just want this part of the painting to begin to fill up a little bit. This is also now on the shady side of the ridge, so it's okay for us to have darker, duller tones because we're not getting as much light pushed back to our eye in this part of the painting. And just trying to fill in this corner here and really letting my hand really fall away and really letting my I'm really trying to create also a darker, more shadowy tone on this side, so I'm letting, I kind of want my hand to fill in these orange areas a bit with a darker shade of orange. And by spreading the paint, I'm kind of doing that a little bit. Cool. Now, I want to now take our I'm going to take some brighter tones here. I'm going to pick our detail brush. And I'm just going to let me fill in here a little bit. Too big. Too big. Yeah, I'm definitely going to come back in and fix up some of this sky here because this is a little bit lower than it's supposed to be. The other option that I have is to move all this up. I don't really want to do. I'd rather kind of go back and fix the sky later on. This again is one of those beauties of digital painting to where I can now kind of fix that. Actually, if we look at our grid, how do we look compared to our grid? Yeah, we're looking pretty good. So we still have our images are kind of still right where it should be. We're kind of having different contrasting things on the top and the bottom. So this is definitely something I think is coming along a little bit nicely. And back to our sketch layer, having a look. Again, looking pretty good in terms of where we are supposed to be. I think the biggest problem we have now, well, is this the gap along the bottom here. We can fix that later on by going back and fixing the sky a little bit. So let's turn the sketch layer back off, and we'll get back to it. Let's put some more rare stones in. Again, similarly, following along, creating texture. I kind of want these to follow and kind of stop as we approach that ridge. As we approach the drop off into the ridge. This is roughly the area where Tuckerman's Ravine is. It's very popular among hikers and skiers in the winter. Trying to keep my strokes here very short and very free to let the overall cragginess come through, and to let some of that more stippled texture apply as well. Again, just kind of scratching at it like I was before. Just being mindful of where things are going to change from how we're going to go from, being in a very alpine environment to being an environment where we have trees. Being from a very exposed environment to going to an environment that has, much more age and lush forest beneath than we have over here. But on this side, it's going to happen much higher. Cool. So now, darker shaded green, and I'm going to take my grainy grooves, and I'm just going to go through, and right about here, we're just going to start. Blend. What I'm also trying to do is create a very gradual appearance of the trees on this ridge so that we can get a real sense of how terrain is shaping and changing beneath us. And then I'm going to kind of adjust my strokes some, let them change and follow the contours a bit. And really, we want to let them play and interact with the colors below. Removing, adding back, removing, adding back, letting it have character. Removing, adding back, removing, adding back. Just letting the paint do its thing. Letting the paint create the illusions for us. As I am doing this, what I'm trying to do is recreate some of the steepness that we should be having here as well, and redirect a lot of my strokes to be much more vertical to accommodate this fact that we have a very, very steep ridge line here. By letting things like this take shape, we're also giving the illusion that there are parts that are not tree covered, that there are parts where there are rock slides or down trees where the winds were too strong, or something is there that is keeping our lovely trees from growing. We also want to give the impression that we are higher than these points, because we are. We're not higher than Washington. We're not higher than Monroe. We're probably higher than Top Ridge. We are definitely higher than this. We are definitely higher than this. So we want to really create the impression this is really falling away and really creating depth into the valley floor, which is about 2,000 feet, or probably more, probably close to 3,000 feet below where I'm standing in this image. Back to a bigger blender brush and just pulling down. Letting these greens fill this area up a little bit, because again, I just want to create a base. Color that's a bit different, so that when I go to paint the ridge later on, I have something to tack onto. And really for now, my focus is back in here. Cool. So I think that is good for there. And I think what I need to do next is Mount Monroe. And Little Monroe. Monroe we can kind of see already. Little Monroe we can't. So we're going to turn that back on. And let's see here, my plan for Monroe. Monroe is very much in the shade, so I really want to make sure that I am outlining it first. And I really want to separate Monroe from its friends that are behind it. So I'm going to take a very dark shade here, and I'm going to take a much more flowing brush, and I'm going to just undo that mark. I'm going to create a new layer, and now I'm going to follow along Monroe. Being mindful of the fact that Monroe is going to dip down here and meet this ridge. I don't want to paint over that. I want to give the illusion that this is connecting to this, and this Monroe is sitting on top of the ridge. So I'm going to have to really blend this in together, really match this together to make it work and come together. Now we have that, let's establish the front facing side, the sun facing side, with some color. And then use a similar but darker tone on the far side. And then, again, similar but darker. Let this fall away. Cool. Now, I'm going to blend that some and let it mingle with the colors that are below it. Now that I've established it, I can also turn off my sketch layer. This is basically our Monroe base. It's very similar to Washington's base, but now it's Monroe. And I'm just pulling this down and I'm filling in the scene somewhat. And I'm letting it create a base color that I can then apply to the rest of the scene. And really what I'm doing is just creating something that I can grab onto as I work in more detail in a moment here. Again, I'm okay if I paint over some which carried over here because I need it to be in front. Now Monroe is very gray. Monroe is very rocky as well. So let's take some darker shades, detail brush, very small, and work in some texture. On the darker side, we're going to work in that texture in a much more downward motion to accommodate the fact that Monroe has a very steep western slope on back. Okay, now again, blender brush much smaller. And just scratch at it. Now, I want to also add on some of our darker tones. I'm going to go to our brown. On the darker side, it's going to be much darker down here. So I'm going to follow along and fill in some of those areas. And then again, I just want to pick at it. And my goal here is to really show this kind of very pyramid shape of Mount Monroe. Really is quite striking. It just kind of like juts up onto the ridge. Okay, and now backing along the bottom here, I do want to add on some of these more orangey tones. There, and touch, a touch of red. You don't want to touch. Again, just picking at it. What I'm doing here by spreading out that darker color too is I'm letting Monroe cast a little bit of shadow. Onto its range below. And add in some slight highlights near the top. And work them along here. Almost as if Monroe has up a number. Terminator. Sorry, Terminator. Okay. And again, some darker shades of brown. And all I'm trying to do is have some subtle variation here so that we have the appearance of the darker side of the ridge. Now, I want to move on to the lighter side of Monroe. And the lighter side of Monroe has some different stuff to it. So we're going to start with this kind of brown color. And I'm just going to kind of follow along here. Mm-hmm. And we'll move this like so. And we can kind of barely see this, which is good. This is again one little extra texture to this base that I really want. It's okay if I go over the green here, because again, this is under Little Monroe, so we're going to go over it, and all it's going to do is add more paint for us to grab onto. Now, another shade of brown, and I'm just going to try to fill in. A shade of orange. And a very dark shade of red, the touch. And what's missing here are our balloons. So let's take this guy. Again, I'm trying to follow the same striations here and have my brush strokes be a little more consistent. And then move that. And then we're just going to scratch it. Being mindful of the direction that I want to go in. Washington, I'm going to try to create these little ravines that hint at ways to climb the top of the mountain, things that draw the eye to the peak. And I almost want the eye to go from peak to peak. Now, larger brush. Just pulling down and blending at the bottom here. And this is all it's going to do is give us more paint to grab onto later on. If we paint on newer layers. As I'm moving up with a larger brush, I'm being very careful to just touch. I'm being very careful to not actually have strokes that are full and complete, because I'm worried that I'm going to get rid of some of that stipple action by doing so. Being mindful of my brush size, basically. Cool, this is a good point to save as well, so we're going to do that. And now we've come pretty far along. And I think I'm going to end our stream for today here. So for those of you that watched, I do thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good day.